Hello, class. This is Garrett Durham with History 706 here at Liberty University for the summer 2025 semester. Um, this is my story map project presentation for the in ArcGIS for this class. The subject and focus of my project is Operation Zapata, is what I named it, a timeline of the Bay of Pigs invasion from April 1961. And this is a topic that I've always been fascinated with. It's a topic that I've always been really, like I said, really interested in. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been really interested in the Cold War, especially with Cold Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Bay of Pigs is a really, especially fascinating event for me in diplomatic and military history, just because it was almost a secret war that was fought, and essentially it was with U.S. Government and military, U.S. government intelligence community and things like that. Their backing and training that they gave to the Cuban exiles to take out Castro, and to me that's fascinating. The context around this, the Bay of Pigs invasion, like I said, happened on the night of April 16th, early morning of April 17th, 1961. And essentially it was the goal. The idea was originally from President Dwight Eisenhower in March 1960. Of course, this plan wasn't put into effect until after Kennedy's election, and it was essentially handed or dumped over to Kennedy, perhaps because Eisenhower was a five-star general in the Second World War and Kennedy was only like a lieutenant. That may have been a reason. But Kennedy kind of ran with it and said this is a good plan. He trusted his intelligence advisors who said it was a good plan, and they were really counting on, after this invasion, for the Cuban people to revolt against Castro and his regime. Fidel Castro started a revolution from the mid-1950s until essentially New Year's Day 1959. He ran out Fulgencio Batista, who was the previous dictator of Cuba. He ran him out of the country. Fidel Castro took over, his government took over, and still to this day, it is essentially ran by the Castro government. Raúl Castro is handed power down to someone non-family now, but as of a few years ago. But he's still alive, and the government of Fidel is very much still alive. And like I said, that's extraordinary given the fact that it's 65 years ago, whether you agree with it or not. That's a really fascinating tale. And this Bay of Pigs is really what invasion is really what locked down the power inside Cuba. And in fact, Che Guevara, who is one of Fidel Castro's top lieutenants, told Dean Rusk, who was Secretary of State or one of the LBJs after Kennedy's advisors, Kennedy and LBJ's advisors, who told him basically, Che Guevara told him, thank you very much for that ridiculous invasion because it helped us lock down power inside Cuba. And that speaks volumes to this. And my project essentially, let's see here, I give a little vintage map of the invasion of Cuba. Of course, I give a little subheading there with a summary and paragraph of the invasion and the information about it. The goal and purpose of this project was essentially exactly what I just said. Really tell people or show people how important this plan was and this operation was out of pure desperation to take out Castro. Eisenhower to Kennedy wanted to take out Castro because they were afraid communism would be this close. And that's really my goal and purpose, is to kind of show people geographically how close this really was. And you can decide for yourself if it really was a threat. The next following year, he had the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was obviously a much bigger threat. But the Bay of Pigs invasion, to take out this government before it got to that point, I think that's geographically, I want to show people how close this really was. And to me, that's fascinating. Here's a little timeline and art descriptions from the project. Basically the same map descriptions that I do have. There's Fidel Castro that I do have on the actual map. In the CIA, this slide shows how involved they really were filtering propaganda into the island, especially on the night around the Bay of Pigs invasion, telling people to revolt against Castro. I have a video here from Bay of Pigs footage, another video of Kennedy discussing 4 American pilots that were actually killed from the Alabama Air National Guard. And then, of course, you have the map, obviously, the interactive map here that does a great job. So almost like a digital museum here. And then, of course, I have audio. I have footage in these. Really, really interesting. But it shows the invasion points, the kind of the scales of the invasion timeline, all that good stuff. Here's a little clip of audio from that CIA-controlled propaganda radio that I was actually had interpreted by someone and verified actually that's what it's talking about. So this project matters in many ways, I think, essentially because it matters, like I said at the beginning, that this is a huge U.S.-Cuban relations are still rocky 64 years later, and that speaks volumes, like I said, to the two countries and to Cuba, really, on how a revolution that was started by just a small group of men is still very much alive and passionate today about what it is. And I think that is one of the takeaways that I really want the readers to leave with on my project, and geographically how close this is. And I want them to see how, second, I want them to see how, a good digital history tool in general. And third takeaway, I want them to see how extraordinary this is, that these people were actually able to live very long lives. Raul Castro, Fidel's brother, is actually still alive, and how really extraordinary. I'm not saying I admire them, but how extraordinary that is, and how U.S.-Cuban relations are still rocky. It's lightened up now. I'm traveling there with my church next year with a group, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And but how extraordinary it is that U.S. and Cuban relations are still the way they are. But that's the takeaways and purposes of my project. I'm very much passionate about this subject, and I look forward to finishing it out. Thank you very much.